Greetings everyone and welcome in today's PCB webinar. My name is Gzim and I am the Portfolio Manager for Security at PCB. Today I will be as an organizer of this webinar and I hope we will have an interactive webinar with all the questions and your comments. For your information, I assume you all know that PCB organizes daily webinar in our 5 portfolios, and every week we organize a webinar on security portfolio covering different topics and areas. I will take this opportunity to inform you that we will organize a training event from June 27th to July 1st on Stockholm, Sweden, with the topic Advanced Auditing Techniques. You can find more information on our website by writing at event2016@pcb.com. We will turn back to webinar. In this topic we will hear about common pitfalls of ISO 27001 implementation and certification project. This webinar will be presented from PCB trainer Mr. Gabor Egei. Mr. Egei has been working for many years as information security consultant, auditor and advisor. Among many certifications, he holds also certification on ISO 27001, ISO 27005, CISA and CIRSC. We hope this webinar will help you understand the importance of ISO 27001 implementation process. If you have any question, you can write them at any time in question box in the right-hand control panel, or you can use the option to raise your hand and we will answer to all of them accordingly. Please, Gabor, you may continue.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. The purpose of this presentation is to share some insight into what can go wrong with any kind of information security management system implementation that is being 27001. Normally, an implementation starts with, let's just start a project statement, which is really nice, and this is a kind of hype these days, so very push thing to do. And many organizations tend to fail to understand that going into project mode, it doesn't mean that it will be successful. We will talk about in a bit about the success ratio. So just the fact that it's going to be a project, it's not necessarily that it will result in a valuable outcome. Also, many organizations tend not to follow any standardized methodologies around project management, be that PMI or Prince2 or whatever it is. Some they create their own methodology, and regardless whether you follow a methodology or you don't follow a methodology, there are certain number of requirements you need to fulfill. We are not going to go into the project management side of it, but this is one of the things that can really influence the positive outcome of any implementation exercise. So what I wanted to emphasize with this is that just because you start up a project, it doesn't mean that you will get the value out of the exercise. But if you do start a project, then you should make sure that you follow certain principles that are associated with the project management in itself. And ultimately, one of the most important things within the whole exercise is getting management support, management commitment. Saying, well, we start up a project, here you go, play around, do it, just implement it. It doesn't mean that they really support it. Management needs to demonstrate that they are committed to get the value, get the ultimate outcome of implementation of security controls. And they really look forward to having the controls in operation. So it's not just to say, yeah, I'm interested, I want to have the security, but really get security as something embedded into the processes so that it's going to work over time as intended. And unfortunately, this requires that they act accordingly. They set the priorities for the organization, because at the end of the day, all organizations have a number of projects ongoing at the same time, so you need to set the right priorities amongst them and make sure that you allocate the resources needed for the execution of the exercise. Interesting to know that PMI, which is one of the US project management frameworks, they released a study last year, 2015, suggesting that the success ratio of project management is around 64%. So only that many of the projects resulted in success, which means it failed for, the rest failed for a number of reasons. KPMG, which is one of the big 4 audit firms, they also made a study which pointed out a number of reasons why projects failed. 52% of these were because of scope unclarity. So the scope was not clearly defined. 40% resulted in failure because they didn't get the support, the necessary means, the actual support, the resources to deliver the desired outcome. So at the end of the day, it's really critical that management understands what is needed, and it's not just to say, yes, we are committed to do it, but they really need to live by that commitment. The other generic statement I used to hear, and I still hear it these days, we are secure. We never had any issues, and for that reason, well, it's easy. We implement ISO at the finger. It's unfortunately it's not that easy. ISO is a rather complex framework, not because it's ISO, but because security is a complex issue, and the implementation requires a number of considerations. It doesn't mean that you need to implement everything that ISO says, but you need to consider everything that ISO says, and you need to argue why you do it or why you don't do it, and how you do it. You need to come up with a reasonable approach. The argument that we never had any major security incidents, well, that's a false sense of the reality. Just the fact that you didn't realize, you didn't detect the incident, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen to you. Recently, there was a data breach investigation report released by Verizon that established that most of the time it takes 9 months to realize that there has been a breach within an organization. So it's not that, well, we have been breached, so we know the next day or the day after. Sometimes it depends on how well the IT systems are built, how well you meticulously monitor the environment, and even then it requires a certain number of hours to be spent on investigation to see what could have caused the problem. So at the end of the day, ISMS is not about implementing something and getting certified for something because it's nice to represent the market value of the certification itself. Obviously, that is a value added to the whole process. But at the end of the day, what matters is ultimately the security within the organization. So you need to understand your practice, you need to understand the risks, and treat the gaps as needed. It doesn't mean that you need to treat everything, but you need to understand what the consequences for not treating them, so you need to accept the risk, which means you need to manage the risk. Remediate where not acceptable is something that can go different ways. At the end of the game, what matters is that you weigh your possibilities and you try to find the right balance. I forgot to mention that if anyone during any of the slides has any questions, please engage in the discussion, because I don't mind breaking my presentation and trying to answer at best my abilities. Any questions, and then we can go back to the presentation. Or at the end of the day, we can have the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Right, the next slide is about risk management. Risk management is not only about IT. Well, it shouldn't be about IT. Risk and any IT security or information security should be about the business itself. So it requires really good understanding of the business process. Everything should be driven by business. There is no such a thing as IT risk. IT associated risk can be there, but even then it's business driven. And once you understand the business processes, which is normally understood through number of interviews, through BIA, the business impact analysis, then you need to try to dig deeper and come up with a good risk management approach. Again, there are a number of methodologies on the market. And when you start managing the risk, you need to be pragmatic. You won't be able to treat everything, especially not to the greatest extent. So what you need to make sure is that it's pragmatic. You treat the ones that are most sensitive to your operation. Whatever remediation activities you decide upon, you need to validate it with business, because at the end of the exercise, they need to accept whatever the residual risk is. The implementation needs to be manageable, actionable, proportionate to the risk, and the whole exercise requires cyclical validation, so it goes into the PDCA cycle, Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's not a one-time effort. I need to repeat, it's not a one-time effort. Many organizations consider, yeah, well, we will do a gap assessment, we will fix the problems, and then off you go. Unfortunately, that will not give you any long-standing results. The problem is not just because the certification requires it, but because of the ever-changing landscape, the threats, the vulnerabilities, you need to reevaluate the risks associated to your operation, and you might need to tweak the controls built into the processes so that they remain efficient and effective. Need to say that ISO controls are not about efficiency, it's about effectiveness. So whatever remedy or measure you identify, they need to be addressing the risk. How effectively they do that, I mean, do you use manual or automated controls? It doesn't make any difference. The auditor might make some sort of remarks that, yeah, well, you could improve that, the efficiency, but at the end of the day, as long as your control is designed in a specific way, your management is aware of it, and the control as designed operated, you achieve the ultimate goal, the risk is managed. Regarding involving internal parties, it's a rather frequent activity that management says, well, we don't have the competencies, we don't have the resources, we will engage external parties. The major concern I would raise there is that depending on the complexity of your organization, it can be very tricky because it takes a very long, or it could take a very long time, so that the external party understands your operation, understands the business. And till the time they get up to speed on everything, you lose quite some time. Normally, depending on the complexity, and since I have something like 18 years audit experience, most of which was external audit, I've seen above 100 companies in IT domain. And I can tell you that it varies in between 1 to 2 weeks up until 1.5 years to understand what the company does and how it's doing it, whether it's reasonable to manage IT security in the way that currently it is managed. So it is a dangerous road to go down that, well, we will engage, we will invite someone external, and they will do the job. You might face quite serious expenses and still no result in the end. The other thing is brand. I've come across many organizations that say, oh, well, we will engage KPMG, PwC, whatsoever. It's not about the specific brands I just mentioned. It's about, yes, they are good, they are professional in their domain, but it's not that they are the only ones that they can do the job. It's any kind of professional who has the right level of experience and who is open-minded can do as good a job as the Big Four or any other consulting firms, Accenture. I used to work for one of these Big Four firms, and I can tell you it helps as long as you gain your experience within them. But it doesn't mean that you need to work with one of them. Okay. Going to the next slide. Generic remark about ISMS and ISO 27000 that is normally coming from CIOs, so the Chief Information Officer or IT Manager or even the CEO is that, well, it's IT security. Why should I bother? They have a security officer. He is the response to the problems. Yeah, well, you can potentially understand the argument because in the title it says security and also the issue is related to security, but he's not the answer to everything. The security officer might have operational roles, might have only advisory role, and the operational activities reside with the actual operational teams, IT operational teams like change team, like infrastructure team. Either way, security officer is not always empowered to take action, which means if you say that the security officer is there to fix the problems and he is not empowered, it doesn't really it's not going to really happen. What you need to make sure is that either the security officer is empowered, but even then he would need to consult with the business because, as we said in the beginning, IT security or information security is not about IT in itself, it's about the business. So regardless whether you assign the activities to the security officer or not, business management and IT management needs to be involved, and IT management still needs to be involved because every decision will have a consequence on the operation, be that resource, so manpower, be that financial, be that operational, be that organizational, because you might even need to reorganize how things are done within the company. So what security should come down to and should be managed by is the business side. Unfortunately, business is not always security minded. Most of the time they don't necessarily have the right knowledge, the right skill set to say yes, no, I want this, I want that. They might have business functional requirements, but understanding what that bears as a IT risk is not necessarily something they will realize. That's when the security officer or security consultant will emerge to a level where they need to advise the business side. IT security should be a business enabler, and the security officer should support it, but ultimately everything is in favor of the business. So security officers should not impose. Well, they can set the targets, but even then it's not about that they set the target and it needs to be like that. It's about managing risk. So if you cannot comply with something, you need to always consider the possibility of exceptions. And as long as you have the exceptions documented and accepted by management together with the risk associated to the exception, it's okay. And decisions should not be taken by IT at all, in the sense that if a risk is deemed acceptable or not, it's always the business that should decide. Obviously, IT can say, well, yeah, but I still want to try to fix the problem. But if it's too difficult, as long as business doesn't want to allocate the resources of any kind, then you just need to understand it and live with the consequences. You need to do your best as an IT professional, and there you are covered. And one of the most important things in this whole exercise is to educate the business. You need to work together with them. You need to engage them in discussions. And this is going to be a long, long journey. You need to have first the high-level buy-in, so CIO, CEO, CFO. At the end, it's also the financial side that needs to understand the consequences for the operation if the security is not in the process. And once you have the high-level support, then you can organize awareness trainings, make sure that operations understands the responsibility assigned to them. And with that high-level discussion about pitfalls around the implementation of information security management frameworks, we reached the end of the presentation. So I open up to questions.
Okay, Gabor, we have the first question. It is, does ISO 27001 require that you use a specific risk assessment method?
It requires compliance to the 27005, which is very generic, so at the end of the day you can potentially use most of the frameworks available on the market, be that Margarit, be that Mehari, be that Octave. As long as you consciously do what is needed to be done and you follow the methodology and you document everything you do, it should be okay. And what's more, even if you feel that those are too complex, because there are really complex methodologies on the market. I wouldn't want to mention anything because I don't want to create bad marketing for anyone. But if you feel that the ones that are available on the market are too complex, you can set up your own framework and manage it as long as it's documented and you argue why you do what you do, and it's clearly understood and acknowledged by management, it should be okay.
Okay, the second question is, can we develop as a company any approach or technique that would ensure our conformity in the ISO implementation and also help us eliminate the pitfalls?
Well, methodology to implement it and avoid pitfalls. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet for this. You need to have a skilled ISO implementer. It's a complex matter because one thing is you need to have the technical skills and the audit skills also to make sure that whatever is going to be implemented is going to withstand any kind of audit. That's the first thing. But even if you have the competencies to set the framework, problem is the implementation, because as long as there is no project around it, well, I don't like to use the word project because, like I said, it's kind of hype. If you don't have a formal approach to implement the ISMS and management commitment, you will almost 70–80% of the cases fail because you will not have the resources to implement, you will not have a commitment from the employees to implement, and even if it appears that they were committed, so you have the resources, you have seemingly the commitment, you could still end up with having inconsistent implementation, and that comes down to the lack of proper education, lack of commitment, lack of disciplinary action. When there are no consequences for not implementing what is needed by management, practically you can sign off on your own death. It's going to be really difficult to achieve anything.
Okay, the next question is, can you provide us with any tips on how to make management understand the certification is a good idea?
That's a difficult question. And not because it's difficult to answer, but because first you need to understand that security is important. Like I said, it's not about certification itself. It's the value that it brings together with the certification. Ultimately, it shouldn't be about getting the certification. It should be about tightening security within the organization. So probably the best way to make them understand would be that you would need to perform a rather detailed IT security audit or information security audit. So normal activities around logical access management, physical access management, change management, vulnerability management, incident management. These are the main, really main topics within the ISO domain. And as long as you identify significant gaps within the processes, but again, it requires competencies in auditing and factual auditing. So not just you have an interview and take notes and whatever they said, you just take them. You need to substantiate the findings with evidence. Once you have a clean list of sensitive or significant issues within the organization, then you can go to the management and say, well, these are the topics that we came across. That means that you run that risk on that front, you run that risk on that front, and so on and so on. And they might say, which is normally the first reaction from business management, well, it's IT that should fix it. Yes, but it's your responsibility because you are the CEO. So normally it comes down to the United States approach. The New York Stock Exchange listed clients, normally it's the CEO that faces the consequences for not having proper management controls in the organization. That's why for Enron, for all those companies that went bankrupt, it's always the top management that is taken into question, and they need to account for, okay, yes, we have now the SOX 404 implementation, we are aware of the issues, we are working on them, we had a plan to manage. As long as one company management cannot say, yes, we know about the issues, we are in control, we have a mitigation plan, we have a plan to remediate the problems, and so on and so on. From that point on, they can say that it's the IT management, and depending on the size of the problem, they might even be able to take the CIO or head of IT accountable for lack of actions. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily only him. Top management who is not necessarily listening or want to listen to the IT operations and associated risks. So it's a rather complex activity, and again, here I would not be able to tell you that it's going to work like a snapshot. It requires quite some preparation.
Okay.
I hope this answered the question.
We hope so. Okay, the next question is a narrow scope, does narrow scope helps on the implementation of ISO 27001?
That's a good question, and the direct answer is yes, it does. The smaller you start, the better success you will have. So having one business unit started for the implementation, it will definitely help you, because once you demonstrate, well, you should pick the easiest one. And once you demonstrate that it works, it's possible, then you might get a better buy-in from the other teams, units, depending on your structure of the organization.
Okay, and the last question is, according to best practices, is it a time limitation about how long should we allocate to a risk assessment process?
It varies. There is no standard for that. If you come up with your own shortened and simplified methodology, it can be done in probably a couple of weeks' time. If you go with the most complex framework available on the market, the one I know, it would take something like 9 months to 1 year.
Okay. Thank you, Gabor, for sharing this highly informative presentation. We believe the attendees had the chance to learn many new things today, and I suggest you to take time and see our future webinars that we will be hosting. Next Wednesday, we will host a webinar topic which is called Agile Security, Recalibrating Information Security for Agile Development Projects. And you can also take time and visit our website www.pcp.com on the webinar section to register for our future webinars. Thank you once again to all of you, and we hope to meet you soon in our future webinars.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.